The sun beat down on the cracked asphalt of Main Street as Officer Wilson leaned against his patrol car, sipping coffee from a paper cup. He'd been with the Pinewood Police Department for 15 years now, and most folks in town knew to stay on his good side. Some called him fair, others called him tough, but everyone agreed he ran a tight ship in this little corner of America. Traffic moved slowly through the heart of Pinewood that Friday afternoon. Summer heat had everyone moving at half speed, except for Officer Wilson, who spotted the broken taillight on the old blue sedan from 50 yards away. His mouth twitched into a slight smile as he tossed his coffee cup and slid into his patrol car. Small infractions like this were his bread and butter. The sedan pulled over without fuss, its worn tires crunching against the gravel shoulder. Through his mirrored sunglasses, Officer Wilson watched as the driver, a woman with dark circles under her eyes and hair hastily pulled back, fumbled through the glove compartment for her papers. In the backseat sat a little girl, no more than 7 years old, wearing what looked like a homemade costume. "License and registration," he said, voice flat as he approached the driver's window. The woman looked up, exhaustion written across her face. "I'm so sorry, officer," she said, her voice slightly shaky. "I know about the taillight. I've been meaning to fix it, but with everything going on." Her voice trailed off as she handed over her license. The little girl in the back leaned forward eagerly. "Are you a real police officer?" she asked, eyes wide with wonder. Officer Wilson glanced at the child and noticed her outfit more clearly now, what appeared to be a military uniform cobbled together from cardboard boxes, aluminum foil, and colored paper. Green crayon marks dotted the cardboard to mimic camouflage, and a medal made from a bottle cap hung from a string around her neck. "What's with the get-up?" he asked, nodding toward the girl. The child sat up straighter, pride evident in her posture. "It's career day at school. I'm dressed as a brave soldier, just like my daddy." She held up a creased photograph showing a man in military fatigues standing in a dusty landscape. "He's far away helping people. Mom says he's a hero." Something about the child's earnest explanation and the poorly constructed costume struck Officer Wilson as amusing. A chuckle escaped his lips before he could stop it. The laugh hung in the air between them. He paused, looking at the makeshift uniform again. "That's not what real soldiers wear, kiddo." The girl's smile faltered. Her small fingers clutched the photograph tighter. The mother tensed visibly. "Her father's been deployed for 8 months now," she explained quietly. "She misses him terribly. Making this costume was her way of feeling close to him." Officer Wilson barely registered her words as he studied the vehicle registration. A passing truck slowed down, the driver watching the scene unfold. Then another car slowed, a teenager in the passenger seat holding up a phone. "You know," Officer Wilson continued, tapping his pen against his notepad, "real heroes wear proper uniforms, not cardboard boxes." He chuckled again, shaking his head as he began writing a ticket. "And they definitely fixed their taillights." The little girl's eyes welled with tears. She slumped back in her seat, tucking the photo of her father beneath her homemade uniform. The mother's hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, knuckles turning white. In that moment, none of them realized that the teenager's phone was recording everything, or that by morning, the entire town would know exactly what had happened on that hot Friday afternoon on Main Street. Officer Wilson tapped his pen against his citation pad, glancing between the anxious mother and her now quiet daughter. More cars had slowed down to watch the scene unfold. The afternoon heat seemed to intensify as the silence stretched between them. "Do you know how much it costs to replace a taillight?" Officer Wilson finally asked, breaking the uncomfortable quiet. "About $15 at any auto shop." "That's less than what you probably spent on." He gestured toward the backseat, "all that cardboard and tape." The mother's jaw tightened, but she remained silent, eyes fixed straight ahead. "I need your registration," Officer Wilson continued, his voice carrying clearly in the still air. Nearby, a young couple had stopped walking to observe the situation, the woman frowning slightly as she caught the officer's tone. The mother opened her glove compartment with trembling hands, sifting through papers. A few bills fell out, past due notices with red stamps across them. She quickly gathered them up, cheeks flushing with embarrassment. "Looks like someone needs to get their priorities straight," Officer Wilson remarked, eyebrow raised. Proper car maintenance is actually required by law, unlike playing dress-up. The little girl in the backseat clutched her father's photo tighter, a single tear rolling down her cheek. "Daddy says following rules keeps people safe," she whispered, her voice small but clear. "That's why he went away to help, to keep people safe." Officer Wilson barely glanced at her. "Well, honey, your daddy should have taught you that real soldiers wear real uniforms, not arts and crafts projects. Maybe when he gets back, he can explain the difference." His dismissive tone made the words sting even more. The mother finally found her registration and handed it over, her hand still shaking. "My husband has been gone for 8 months now," she said quietly. "His unit was deployed with very little notice. I'm working 2 jobs while he's away." Officer Wilson seemed unmoved as he wrote the ticket. "That's unfortunate, ma'am, but it doesn't exempt you from basic traffic laws." By now, a small crowd had gathered on the sidewalk. A mail carrier had stopped his route to watch. 2 teenagers stood beside their bicycles, one of them holding up a phone, clearly recording. An older man in a veteran's cap shook his head in disapproval. "My daddy's a real hero," the little girl suddenly said, her voice stronger now despite the tears spilling down her face. "He helps hurt people get better. He sends me letters with drawings. Her voice broke as she looked down at the photograph. "He said my costume would make him proud." The mother reached back and squeezed her daughter's knee. "That's enough, sweetie," she murmured, though the pain in her eyes was unmistakable. Officer Wilson ripped the ticket from his pad with a flourish. "Well, here's something else to add to your collection of papers," he said with a slight smirk. "You've got 30 days to fix that taillight and pay the fine. Maybe spend less on craft supplies next time." He handed over the citation, seemingly oblivious to the whispers from the onlookers or the teenager's phone still pointed in his direction. As the mother took the ticket, the wind caught one of the past due notices she hastily stuffed back into the glove compartment. It fluttered out the window, landing face up on the pavement. Final notice: Military Family Assistance Program. Officer Wilson turned away without noticing it, already heading back to his patrol car, unaware that his career was about to change forever. Officer Wilson pulled into the police station parking lot the next morning, yawning as he grabbed his coffee from the cup holder. He'd slept poorly, though he couldn't quite figure out why. Just another routine traffic stop after all. Nothing he hadn't done 100 times before. The station seemed unusually quiet as he pushed through the front doors. The desk officer glanced up, then quickly looked away. 2 other officers standing by the water cooler stopped talking when they spotted him. "Morning," Officer Wilson called out. Nobody answered. He made his way to his desk, noticing a few sideways glances and hushed whispers. His partner, usually chatty about weekend plans, kept her eyes fixed on her computer screen. "Did somebody die or something?" Officer Wilson asked, only half joking as he settled into his chair. Before anyone could respond, the chief's door opened. "Wilson, my office, now." The walk to the chief's office felt longer than usual. The chief, a stocky woman with salt and pepper hair who'd served 25 years on the force, gestured to the chair across from her desk. "Sit down," she said, her voice unnervingly calm. She turned her computer monitor toward him and pressed play on a video. Officer Wilson recognized it immediately: yesterday's traffic stop. The footage had clearly been taken from a bystander's phone and showed the entire interaction in painful detail. His dismissive laugh, his comments about the little girl's costume, the mother's quiet dignity. "This video has over 50,000 views since last night," the chief said. "Our phone lines are jammed. The mayor called me at home. Twice." Officer Wilson shifted uncomfortably. "Chief, with all due respect, it was just a routine traffic stop. The vehicle had a broken." "Stop talking," the chief cut him off, placing a folder on the desk between them. "This is what you didn't bother to learn yesterday." She opened the folder and slid across a photograph. A military portrait of a man in uniform, medals displayed across his chest. "That's Army Staff Sergeant Thomas Blake, combat medic, Bronze Star recipient, currently serving his 3rd tour overseas. The little girl you mocked? His only child. The woman struggling with those bills? His wife, working as a nurse's aide and weekend cashier to make ends meet while he serves our country." Officer Wilson's mouth went dry. "That cardboard costume you laughed at, That child made it herself after her class had a Heroes Day assignment. Her teacher called this morning. Said the little girl was so proud of it she'd been working on it all week. Wanted to surprise her father with photos. The chief stood up and walked to a wall of commendations. Among them hung a military shadow box. My son is stationed in the same region as Sergeant Blake, she said quietly. Sergeant Blake's unit provides medical support to 4 forward operating bases. Last month they treated 67 wounded soldiers and civilians after an attack. 3 of his team members were injured, he wasn't. She turned back to face Officer Wilson. In Sergeant Blake's last video call home, he told his daughter that the hardest part of his job wasn't the danger, it was being away from her. Officer Wilson stared at the photograph, seeing for the first time the resemblance between the soldier and the little girl. The same determined eyes. "Chief, I didn't know." "That's right, you didn't know. And you didn't care enough to find out." She closed the folder with finality. "You're on administrative leave, effective immediately. Turn in your badge and gun. The department will conduct a full review." As Officer Wilson stood to leave, the chief added, "And Wilson, that broken taillight? The part was on backorder at the base auto shop. Sergeant Blake ordered it before he deployed. It arrived yesterday, after your stop." Officer Wilson drove home in his personal car, his uniform shirt replaced with a plain gray t-shirt, his badge and gun locked away in the chief's office. The morning sun felt too bright, the streets too familiar yet somehow different now that he was seeing them through civilian eyes. He stopped at a red light downtown and noticed something new. An American flag hanging in the coffee shop window with a handwritten sign beneath it, "Proud supporters of our military families." Across the street, the hardware store had put up a similar display. Strange, he thought. Those hadn't been there yesterday. As he continued driving, he spotted more flags, more signs. The bank had a large yellow ribbon tied around its front pillar. The grocery store marquee read, "Thank you to those who serve and the families who wait." Officer Wilson pulled into the gas station, trying to make sense of it all. As he filled his tank, a newspaper stand caught his eye. The front page of the local paper featured a blurry still from the video, him standing over the mother's car, the little girl visible in the backseat. The headline read, "Local officer under review after confrontation with military family." "Rough day?" the attendant asked, eyeing Wilson's face with recognition. Wilson nodded stiffly and paid for his gas. As he walked back to his car, he overheard 2 elderly women talking nearby. "Did you hear about that poor child? Made her costume all by herself. Her father's a real hero from what I've read. 3 tours overseas. And that officer just laughed at her." Wilson drove home with the windows up, radio off, trying to shut out the voices. But when he turned onto his street, he couldn't ignore what he saw. His next-door neighbor, a quiet man who rarely did more than nod hello, was hanging an American flag on his porch. 3 houses down, someone had tied yellow ribbons around their oak tree. Inside his house, Wilson dropped his keys on the counter and turned on the TV for background noise. The local news was on. "Community response has been overwhelming," the reporter was saying. The video, which has now reached over 100,000 views, shows local police officer Robert Wilson mocking a child dressed as a soldier for her school's career day. "We've since learned that the child's father is Staff Sergeant Thomas Blake, currently serving overseas." The screen cut to an interview with a woman in a teacher's lanyard. "She worked so hard on that costume," the woman said, wiping a tear. "She wanted to show her classmates why her daddy is her hero." Wilson changed the channel, but found more of the same on the next station. His phone buzzed with a text from his sister. "Is that you in that video? Mom's upset." He turned the TV off and sat in silence, the weight of what he'd done settling over him. Then his phone rang, his cousin Jeff, who he hadn't spoken to in months. "Hey," Wilson answered cautiously. "So you're the one giving us all a bad name." Jeff's voice was tight with anger. "What do you mean us?" "The ones who serve, Rob. The ones who put on a uniform every day." Wilson had almost forgotten that Jeff was military, Air Force, stationed somewhere in the Pacific. "You know what it's like for those families?" Jeff continued. "Do you have any idea what that little girl goes through every night wondering if her dad is safe? And you laughed at her for being proud of him." "I didn't know." "You didn't ask?" Jeff cut him off. You know what my daughter did when I was deployed? Drew pictures of me every single day so she wouldn't forget my face. And you know what would have destroyed her? Some cop laughing at her for missing her dad. The call ended, and Wilson sat alone in his quiet house, surrounded by a community that had, overnight, united against his thoughtlessness. A community that now included his own family. 3 days passed. Officer Wilson barely left his house, avoiding the sideways glances and whispered comments that followed him everywhere in town. His phone had been silent since Jeff's call, except for a brief message from the police chief. The review board would meet next week. Wilson sat at his kitchen table on the 4th morning, coffee growing cold beside a half-eaten piece of toast. The newspaper lay open to a feature story about military families in their community, 15, according to the article, with loved ones currently deployed overseas. He hadn't known there were so many. He pushed the paper away and walked to the window. The sight of his empty driveway reminded him that his patrol car was still at the station. The mundane normality of his neighborhood, sprinklers turning, kids riding bikes, a dog walker passing by, only highlighted how much his own world had shifted. Finally, he made a decision. He showered, put on clean clothes, and drove to the mall. 2 hours later, Wilson stood on the porch of a small blue house on Maple Street. He clutched a shopping bag in one hand and smoothed his hand nervously with the other. Before he could lose his courage, he knocked. No answer. He knocked again, waited, then set the bag down carefully by the door. From his pocket, he pulled a folded note and placed it on top. As he turned to leave, a voice called out from next door. "They're not home." An older woman stood by her mailbox, watching him with cautious eyes. "Do you know when they'll be back?" Wilson asked. "They're staying with their parents in River County," the woman said. "All those calls and reporters, it was too much for the little one." Wilson nodded, understanding. "You're him, aren't you?" the woman asked. "The officer from the video?" He didn't deny it. "I came to apologize." The woman's expression softened slightly. "That little girl cried herself to sleep that night. Her mother told me she put away her costume and wouldn't talk about her father the next day. First time that's happened since he deployed." Each word felt like a stone in Wilson's stomach. He looked back at the bag on the porch. "What's in there?" the neighbor asked. "A real police uniform, child-sized, and a proper military costume, also some art supplies." His voice grew quieter. "And a gift card for the auto shop to cover the taillight and more." The neighbor studied him for a moment, trying to buy forgiveness. "No," Wilson said honestly. "Just trying to fix what I broke, if that's even possible." The woman seemed to consider this. Her mother works at the medical center, evening shifts, and on weekends at the grocery store checkout. Wilson hadn't known this detail either. Another person he interacted with but never really seen. "Thank you," he said, turning to leave. "Officer," the neighbor called after him. "My son served 2 tours. Purple Heart. He never came home the same." She paused. Sometimes the hardest part is that people just don't understand what families go through. Wilson drove straight to the VA hospital on the edge of town. He'd passed it hundreds of times on patrol, but had never been inside. At the front desk, he asked about volunteer opportunities. The receptionist handed him a form. "Any particular department you're interested in?" she asked. Wilson thought about it. "Wherever I can be most useful." That evening, he sat in a recreation room with 4 veterans, playing cards and listening to their stories. One man had been a medic, like Sergeant Blake. When Wilson mentioned the name, the veteran nodded in recognition. "Blake's squad got hit hard last month. Good medic, from what I hear. Saved a lot of lives." Wilson's hands froze mid-shuffle. "Is he okay?" "Far as I know." "Why?" Wilson dealt the cards without answering. He had more questions now than when he'd arrived, but for the first time in days, he also had the beginning of a plan. 2 weeks into his administrative leave, Officer Wilson received a text message from the police chief. "My office. Tomorrow, 9 a.m. He spent the evening ironing his civilian clothes and rehearsing what he would say to the review board. The morning arrived with gray skies and a light drizzle that matched his mood. As he drove to the station, he practiced his apology again and again. The station felt different now, quieter, more serious. Officers he'd worked with for years gave him brief nods as he walked to the chief's office. He knocked once, took a deep breath, and entered. The chief sat behind her desk, but she wasn't alone. A laptop was open in front of her, the screen glowing with a video call interface. Wilson's heart skipped when he saw the desert camouflage uniform on the person in the video. "Officer Wilson," the chief said, "Staff Sergeant Blake wanted to speak with you directly." Wilson stood frozen, unable to move closer, unable to retreat. The man on the screen adjusted his position. The background showed a military tent, sparse and functional. His face was weathered, tanned by harsh sun, but his eyes were clear and steady. "Sir," Wilson managed to say, "I don't know what to." "Please sit down, officer." Sergeant Blake's voice was calm, with none of the anger Wilson had expected. Wilson sat, hands clasped tightly in his lap. "My wife showed me the video," Sergeant Blake said. "We don't get much internet time out here, but the chaplain arranged this call when he heard what happened." Wilson waited for the accusations that justified anger. Instead, Sergeant Blake simply asked, "Do you have children, Officer Wilson?" "No, sir." Sergeant Blake nodded. "My daughter is the bravest person I know. She doesn't cry when I leave, even though I know she wants to. She tells her friends at school her daddy helps people get better when they're hurt, never mentions the danger." He paused, looking down briefly before continuing. "She used to wear her toy stethoscope to bed because that's what daddy uses. After your encounter, my wife tells me she put it away. Won't touch it." The words hit Wilson like physical blows. "I'm truly sorry," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "What hurt her most wasn't the ticket or even your laughter," Sergeant Blake continued. "It was that someone in a uniform, someone she was taught to trust and respect, just like her father, made her feel ashamed of being proud of me." Wilson's throat tightened. "We're serving on the same side, Officer Wilson. Different uniforms, same mission. Protect and serve. That's what I tell my daughter when she asks what I do over here." The chief quietly slid a tissue box across the desk as Wilson struggled to maintain his composure. "My daughter has nightmares," Sergeant Blake said, "not about me getting hurt anymore. Now she dreams about police officers laughing at her. My wife says she hides whenever a patrol car drives by their street." Wilson looked directly at the screen. "What can I do to fix this? Please tell me." There was a long pause. Sergeant Blake seemed to be considering something. Finally, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small object. "This medal was given to me after our unit saved 13 civilians during an attack. I want you to give it to my daughter." Wilson shook his head in disbelief. "Sir, I can't take your medal." "You're not taking it," Sergeant Blake said firmly. "You're delivering it. Tell her it's because she's brave too. Military kids serve in their own way. They just don't get the uniforms or the recognition." A voice called out in the background, and Sergeant Blake looked over his shoulder. "I need to go. We've got incoming wounded." Before the call ended, he leaned closer to the camera. "Officer Wilson, this isn't about punishing you. It's about healing my daughter. Sometimes the hardest part of wearing a uniform is remembering the responsibility that comes with it." The screen went dark, leaving Wilson and the chief in silence. 6 months later, the town hall meeting room was packed to capacity. The mayor stood at the podium, looking out over the crowd of citizens, police officers, and military families gathered for the evening's presentation. "Tonight," the mayor announced, "we're proud to unveil a new program for our community. I'd like to invite Officer Robert Wilson to the stage to tell us more." Wilson walked to the podium, no longer in uniform but wearing a crisp white shirt with a blue tie. The past 6 months had changed him in ways visible even to strangers, the way he carried himself, the thoughtful pause before he spoke, the genuine smile that reached his eyes. "Thank you all for coming," he began. 6 months ago, I made a mistake that hurt a child, disrespected a military family, and disappointed this community. He didn't dance around it or make excuses. That mistake taught me something important. Wearing a uniform, any uniform, means carrying a responsibility bigger than yourself." The room was silent, everyone listening intently. "Today, I'm honored to introduce the Bridge the Gap program." Wilson gestured to a display board beside him showing children's artwork and photographs of police officers with military families. "This initiative will provide resources, support groups, and training for our police department to better understand and serve military families in our community. In the front row sat a woman Wilson now knew well, the mother from that fateful traffic stop. Beside her was her daughter, no longer shy but sitting tall in a proper military-style jacket. The jacket had pins on it, one that matched her father's unit, and most prominently, the medal her father had sent. "I'd like to introduce my partners in creating this program," Wilson continued, his voice warm with genuine respect. "Please welcome Mrs. Blake and her daughter." They joined in at the podium, the little girl now comfortable enough to stand near him without fear. The audience applauded as Mrs. Blake took the microphone. "When my husband left for his third deployment, our daughter and I knew it would be hard," she said. "What we didn't expect was how invisible we sometimes felt to our own community. This program isn't just about helping military families, it's about helping everyone see us." The little girl looked up at Wilson, then stepped bravely to the microphone that the mayor lowered for her. "My daddy helps people who are hurt," she said clearly. "And now Officer Wilson helps kids like me who miss their daddies and mommies when they're away keeping people safe." There wasn't a dry eye in the room as she stepped back. Wilson returned to the microphone. "The Bridge the Gap program has 3 parts. First, every officer will receive training about the unique challenges military families face. Second, we're creating a support network connecting military families with community resources. And third," he smiled at the little girl, "we're establishing a mentorship program, pairing children of deployed service members with first responders here at home." The police chief stood from her seat, holding up her phone. "I have someone who would like to join us," she announced. On the large screen behind the podium, Sergeant Blake appeared, his image slightly delayed by the satellite connection. The crowd erupted in applause. "I'm proud of what you've built," he said, looking not just at his family, but at Wilson too. "Sometimes the hardest battles aren't fought on the battlefield, but in the everyday moments when people choose to understand each other." As the event concluded, the little girl approached Wilson with a folded piece of paper. She handed it to him without a word. When he opened it, he found a crayon drawing of 2 figures standing side by side, one in a police uniform, one in military gear. Between them stood a small figure with a bright smile. At the bottom, in careful handwriting, were the words, "Both my heroes." The local newspaper captured the moment with a headline that would hang framed in the police station for years to come, "From Conflict to Compassion: How One Officer's Mistake Created a Community of Understanding."